Hi, this is Harry from Biofeedback Resources International, and I'm joined by Dr. Jorge Palacios. And I think this is about our fourth session of our series of webinars on neurofeedback and some of the applications of it. So the topic for today is going to be TBI and cognitive rehabilitation, and also relating to neurofeedback and brain technologies in general. So I'm going to start off and just talk a little bit about some of the problems related to TBI, and then we'll hand it over to Dr. Palacios, and he's going to go into more of the information about what we do with EEG and the software and hardware that we use to work with people with these problems with neurofeedback and QEEG. So I'll share my screen. Let's see. Okay, so this is in the series of the webinars that we're presenting, which is leading up to the training that we're doing in September on neurofeedback. And we'll talk more about that later, where we'll go into much more detail about neurofeedback and some of the applications. So this is a book that a couple of people that I know wrote. Mary Lee Esty and Carol Shiflett, Conquering Concussion, Healing TBI Symptoms with Neurofeedback and Without Drugs. And it lists, it's not easy to see there, but it lists some of the problems, some of the symptoms that people present with when they have concussions or brain injuries. And I did a interview with Mary Lee Esty. It's on my YouTube channel. And she was talking about some of the people that would come into her practice, not for concussion, but for other symptoms. And in the intake, she would ask them, did you ever have a concussion or brain injury? And they say no. And she would be working with them, and maybe weeks later, she would be talking to them, and they say, oh, now I remember I fell down the stairs and I was unconscious, or some other issue like that. And so then they really do realize that they did have a concussion. And then there's a connection made between some of the symptoms that they came in with that were unexplained, that now makes sense because there's an injury to the brain. And so that's one of the reasons that she ended up writing this book with Carol Shiflett. And so this is a book that talks about the problems of concussion and some of the symptoms that are related to it, and how neurofeedback can be used as a non-drug treatment for helping with the problems related to concussion. This is showing some pictures about the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, Tua. I can't pronounce his last name. It's tough for me. Tonga Valoa or something like that. But this is one of the things that I ended up having a conversation with Dr. Palacios some time ago after it happened. I'm a big football fan. I was watching a game, and I saw when he had this injury, he was knocked out, and when he got up, he was stumbling off the field. And they let him come back in the game and continue to play. And then a few days later, he had another concussion, and finally was out for a period of time. And apparently he's going to be the starting quarterback for them this season that will be starting soon. But it got us talking about the problems of concussion and in the NFL and in other places, but how in sports, especially because part of the reason is because there's money involved. A lot of times the the safety, you could say, of the player is not necessarily the top concern, and getting them back out playing again sometimes overrules what would make sense medically and treatment and so on. And even the players themselves often don't want to be on the sideline. They want to play, but it's an issue that comes up over and over. So now with brain injury, you have many different things that can happen, and you have many different sources that the brain injury can come from. You can see you can have things like nausea, dizziness, headaches, fatigue, issues with memory, and so on. And the causes of the injuries can be anything from slip and fall to a physical fight to playing a sport and so on. Another big area is in the military, where people who serve in the military and see combat can also have many different types of injuries that can be caused from being hit by something, but not only being hit by something, explosion where they're hit with a physical object, but also from the blast injuries. And there's been research that shows that even when they're not hit with anything physically, the energy that passes through their head can also cause damage. And some of the people who are instructors for explosives, they do training, and obviously they would, when they're exploding something, they would be at what they have decided is a safe distance from the explosion. But research showed that even at those supposedly safe distances, those instructors showed signs of brain injury. And so even in those cases, there can be problems. This magazine cover shows where they were doing work with people who were in the military that had suffered brain injuries, and they have a whole program in one of the military facilities down in the South. I believe it's in Virginia, at one of the military bases, and they have a traumatic brain injury program. And one of the things they did is they had the people who had these injuries make these masks, and the masks were supposed to represent something related to their injury and how they felt and so on. And I've been at the facility, and they have on the wall all of these different masks. And if you are able to look up this National Geographic article, they have many of the images of the masks that they had made in there. Another sport where the brain injuries are pretty common is in ice hockey. And there's a couple that Stu Donaldson and Mary Donaldson had done work with neurofeedback, doing brain mapping and also doing neurofeedback, using it therapeutically for hockey players. And they were seeing that there were certain patterns that of brain injury that many of the players would get in their brain activity. The EEG would show signs of the injury that they had, and they were able to do work to help them through using neurofeedback. And then these are some of the causes here of neurofeedback and I'm sorry, of traumatic brain injury. Here you see falling down, vehicle accidents, and that's one of the things that I've noticed hasn't really gotten that much attention. I did some work in offices that had people that were in motor vehicle accidents, and I didn't see much going on related to brain injury. You know, they were treating their spine and the pain and things like that, but I didn't really see much happening with the brain injury part of it. You have domestic violence, explosions, sports injuries, etc. So these are all things that can contribute to the traumatic brain injuries. And then just leading into what I think Dr. Palacios is going to cover, the EEG is part of what we can measure from the brain related to the activity of the brain. And we have the different frequencies of EEG, the faster waves like the beta, and slower waves like theta and delta. And what the patterns that you would normally expect to see can be disrupted when there's a brain injury. And this is one of the things that we can measure and show the differences, the disruptions that are going on, and then see how we can use neurofeedback to help a person to be able to regulate the activity in the brain that shows up to be dysregulated. So that's the part that I'm going to cover. Again, we're going to be we have planned the full neurofeedback training where we go into much more detail in September 14th through 17th in St. Petersburg, Florida. And you can contact us for more information on that or to register. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. Palacios now, and I'll stop sharing here. So,
thank you, Harry.
You're welcome.
Let's talk a little bit about one element related to not only to TBI, but many other elements that are related to the neurofeedback therapeutics. So let's talk about a little of, because we cannot cover all, but a little about some topics we're going to cover in this seminar, in this coming seminar in St. Petersburg, Florida, on next September. And in TBI and in other diseases, there's a common element that we have to consider. And this common element is the need of cognitive rehabilitation. You know, this is a moment where neuroinformatics has come to a point that can offer a lot for cognitive, not only assessment, but also cognitive rehabilitation. And of course, it is a strong element in cognitive research, which is today called neurocognitive research. But let me tell you that if one element was key in the development of neuroinformatics, it was neurofeedback. We have to read a little and to think if we are beginning to study neurofeedback, all the devices, all the software that has been developed since the last 40 years, 50 years, that have main elements, that has key elements that has been taken recently in account to develop more neuroinformatics platforms. There is a strong interest in all the research field related to neurofeedback in a very different kind of scenario. And let's talk about this a little bit in order to give you a glance of what we are going to discuss and what we are going to train in the next September. So let's talk about the neurofeedback application for brain lesion sequela recovery. And let's take also a review of the statistics from some time ago. For example, Harry was talking about brain injury, TBI, traumatic brain injury that can be suffered from the whole life spectrum, from children to age people, and there was an estimated just in 2016 about 5.3 million Americans just in America living with a TBI-related disability. And if we are talking about stroke, there was 6.5 million in 2017. And in 2020, according to the Alzheimer's Association, there was about 5.8 million Americans 65 and older living with Alzheimer's, and in all these diseases and all these conditions, one element is a key element, which is pretty notable, and it is the cognitive disabilities. A lot of different type of cognitive disabilities, changes in personality, changes in humor, and changes in social behavior. Those elements in general are related just to these three different types of brain conditions. Just taking a more detailed look, but at a glance, of TBI, we have to consider that there is about, well, it is an important cause of disability, and there's an important source of visits to the hospitals, to medical consultation, and also there are a lot of deaths related to TBI, as it was reported in 2014. And there are different ages, as I was telling you, in which TBI is related, but it has been more frequently identified in children between 0 and 4 years, adults 65 years and older, and also in young adults, and of course in all the risk population that Harry told us about. For example, falls are the leading cause, accounting TBI from mild TBI to severe one that can lead the people to death. If we take a look back at stroke, we have to consider that all this number has been increased since they have been reported. For example, 6.5 million of adults have survived a stroke. Yes, they have survived, but with disability. And among those disabilities are cognitive disabilities. And we also have to consider that the prevalence is increasing with the age and with different type of risks. And it has to be also related to different demographic elements. Like, for example, in the case of Hispanic population, there's a more frequent risk of a stroke, and it is due to the kind of diet they are used to. And if we consider Alzheimer's, that we are going to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's, because it is an interesting and new field of opportunities for all the neurofeedback practitioners to work with. With those amount of Americans with Alzheimer's disease, we have to consider that there's a lot of work in which we can work with using neurofeedback. But why I am saying this? Well, let's take a look at the characteristics of Alzheimer's disease since the cognitive and neurophysiological perspective. In the screen, we are looking at an EEG of HD EEG of a 74-year-old woman that is in the first stage, in the initial stage of Alzheimer's. She is having all different kind of complaints related of changes in behavior, changes in memory, and changes in the way is controlling her attention and the way she is controlling the cognitive processes in general. It seems that many processes related to attention and retaining things are getting lost more frequently. There you have a regular EEG, and in that EEG you can see that there is a different kind of activity. First of all, because this is a recording with the eyes closed, and if you see, there is a great lack of alpha traces. That is a key element in all these type of conditions we have mentioned, TBI, stroke, and Alzheimer's, that the resting state condition, of the brain is changing dramatically, and the distribution of the activity is very different. And it should be. We have to consider also that the distribution of the EEG activity is pretty characteristic, for example, in Alzheimer's disease. Let's take a look again to this recording alone, not with a topographic view. And we can see that there is a lot of spaces in the recording without alpha activity. But there is another element which is very interesting. It is that there is a low voltage. In the case of Alzheimer's and also a stroke, you can find a different type of recording with a low voltage. You can see there is a few amount of alpha tracing with eyes closed. This recording was made with eyes closed, and a low voltage in general. And this is an analysis taken at the 398 milliseconds with a very short span of time. And there is a specific organization of the activity in which you can see the prevalence of slow waves in the frontal cortex and the absence of alpha waves in the temporal, parietal, and occipital areas, which are the areas of the prevalence of alpha traces with the eyes closed, even in people from old ages. So it's a pretty characteristic, pretty interesting, the way that the slow waves are taking place of the frontal areas of the brain, and also it is very notorious the low activity and the low voltage in the central areas of the brain, which all the attention processes and the sensory processes have to be present, even with the eyes closed. But if we look at the origin of this activity, Then we have to left aside the sensor level and go to the analysis of the source level, where the activity is grown and is created, is generated. And there we can see this frequency decomposition analysis. What we are looking at is at the frequency decomposition, as you can see in the image, so of delta, alpha waves, and gamma waves. You can see theta. This will be delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma 1, and gamma 2 frequencies. First of all, it is notorious the amount of, delta waves in this in the frontal area. It is notorious. There's low amount of theta, of middle theta, or theta of the mid, the frontal midline. There's since this is the first stage, you can see some traces of theta activity in the frontal midline, so which is encouraging. I'm going to tell you about this a little bit, but you can see also the difference in the organization of the alpha activity, that it is asymmetric and it is at a very small amount of activity, and also the concentration of power. It is not in the occipital area, but only in the parietal area, and as I told you, with characteristic asymmetry. Regarding the fast waves, well, there's certain kind of amount of activity of beta activity, and related the fast wave to the fast waves, we can see a very different pattern in which we can identify zones with activity even with the eyes closed, and we see another element which is very important, that is the very fast waves, which are the gamma 2. We are going to talk about this a little more when we saw a very different type of images. But if we see the images of this person, which is characteristic, that's the reason why is here in this presentation. This is with the eyes open, and you can see the diminution of the theta waves of the midline in the frontal zone, midline frontal line theta. We can see an important amount of concentration of delta activity in the frontal cortex. There's a certain presence of alpha activity, which is not expected as that much with the eyes opened, but is related with the low metabolism, that it is also related to these type of cases. And we can see the lack of activity of beta and gamma 1 activity, but we see gamma 2 activity. So there is in the first stage of Alzheimer's, two elements that are important for future reference, which is some theta activity preserved in the midline frontal zone, and the presence of gamma activity. What happens if we project these images to these sources to the MRI? Well, if we project these images to the MRI, we found much more interesting things. I am not going to show all the information of this analysis, which is very long and complex, but please concentrate your attention in this image. This is an MRI in which the sources has been projected into the cortex. And this is the alpha activity. It is pretty notorious that in the cuneus and the precuneus, there is a very low amount, a few amount of alpha activity. As you can see, this is with the eyes closed, there is practically no activity of the alpha traces. There is certain type of activity, subcortical, that could be related to some other subcortical activity, but in the cerebral cortex, we are not looking at a strong concentration that should be expected of alpha waves. In fact, we are seeing a low amount of concentration of power of this frequency. And if we look at the gamma 1 frequency, we saw more activity. This is with the eyes opened. We began to see activity. And if we take a look at the gamma 2 frequency, we see much more activity. It looks like there is a certain changes in the resting state of the brain in these cases, where the fast activity, the wavelets, can be seen more abundantly. That is the case of the gamma 2 frequency, which is between 60 and 90 hertz. But with that one, it can be done certain kind of recovery, certain kind of rehabilitation. And why I'm saying this? Well, let's take a look at this type of analysis, which is called clusters. That means that we group electrodes from the temporal and the left temporal and right temporal lobes, and we study under conditions of neurocognitive testing of memory, short-term memory mainly, and pattern recognition, to observe the organization, the evoked potential in the range between 150 and 400 milliseconds. As you can see, there is no presence in during the test of the P300, which is the evoked potential for attention. We can say that the subject was seeing the stimuli because there is this P200 potential, which is related to vision, and we can see pulse potentials evoked related mainly to cognitive processing. But look at the time of this activity when it has been present. This means that there is activity, there is still activity, no matter the cognitive deficits in these cases. And if we study the same activity at the source level in the same time, 94 milliseconds, we can observe that there are certain areas of concentration, but with a lack of activity. It seems that during the presentation of stimuli, there is activity, but not enough. We can see here in the projection to the MRI how the activity is dissipated with low voltage. But there is activity. And so we decided to explore connectivity. There is a lot of work exploring connectivity, mainly in this case, Alzheimer's disease, and the results were pretty interesting. As you can see, looking for the looking for attention, we observe that this type of disconnection of the hemispheres, it looks like at the 300 milliseconds, there's more activity in the right hemisphere. We're looking at the bottom of the brain. So if this is the bottom, the nose is here. This is the right hemisphere. This is the left hemisphere. And there is a certain activity that is elicited by the stimuli in the right temporal lobe, but there is few or known activity in the left temporal lobe. But there is connectivity. There is connectivity, and if we study also attention, but between the two temporal lobes, we can find traces in the middle range and in the strong range, no matter the memory disabilities of this patient, of activity in terms of connectivity measure. That means that during the first stage of Alzheimer's, it can be seen connections, activity between the two temporal lobes that can lead us to a place where it can found elements to induce recovery. And if we look also in the 300 milliseconds, but to more fast activity, like for example gamma, there we can find more activity in the connectivity areas. So it seems that it is not known yet that if there is this type of connectivity found as a compensation of the lack of activity in the beta activity of, and it is enhanced. So the brain is making an effort to compensate these disabilities in the high frequencies with the very fast frequencies. But there is an element, a key element here to work with neurofeedback that could be discussed later. It looks like we can start working with this type of patients in this stage of development of the disease in order to make longer this stage, make them more functional. There is the possibility of drug use in these cases, but the patients preserve the memory, but only during the effects of the drug. In these cases, we are basing our recovery in these boundaries of the fast activity. And well, this is the fundamentals for a new era and a new type of neurofeedback applications. Here are some reference. Some reference that are really interested. Since 2017, important people like Onguido, the man that developed the QEEG neurofeedback technique based in source localization, was published this review related to the current states, those days of neurofeedback, and how they could be used for other type of applications. And there are these references are interesting because they are all considering Now there's a field much more wider of interest and work with the application of EEG or QEEG or HD QEEG neurofeedback, like a tool to recover cognitive deficits, even in the case of Alzheimer's. You can see, we can consider that 2017 was the year in which many practitioners and specialists in the research field turned their eyes to the field of cognitive rehabilitation using this technique. This is a very interesting area. The last reference I'm showing you with this interesting title, Making Working Memory Work, which is one of the basic articles used to open this new field of neurofeedback applications for cognitive rehabilitation in these severe cases of brain lesions. Finally, I have to tell you all that our standard neuroinformatics environment is Brainstorm. The authors are in those reference. We use an adaptation for 32 channels of EEG of the pipeline of NISO and et al. There is also the reference. And for the functional connectivity analysis, we base in the atlas by Schaffer et al. There are all the reference. And that we hope you will be registered in our seminar, where you learn the basic and the most recent applications of QEEG biofeedback to neurofeedback and the rehabilitation of different type of conditions, in this case, cognitive disabilities. So this is it.
I was muted, so we'll stop there. And again, we hope that you'll contact us and join us for the training that we're going to be doing, where we will have much more time to go in depth into how you actually do the work with using QEEG and neurofeedback, and have some experience in practicing with some of the equipment and software, and seeing demonstrations where we actually show how you do it.
Yes, we can have a demonstration of the neurofeedback of the frontal midline theta and the enhance of memory capabilities, which is the method that is used for this type of patients.
Great.
Yes.
All right. So we have after this session, we have one more in August.
Yes, we have. But you stopped recording. Did you?
No, I didn't stop yet. I'll stop now. But I was just telling people that hopefully they'll join us for the next one.
Yeah.
Before the actual training in September. We have one more, and you can contact us for that. You should be receiving email too about it. So we'll see you next time.
Yeah, that one is for peak performance.